Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, or welcome if you are new to my channel. Glad to have you here. So we're going to, of course, continue with my current paranormal activity franchise review series, and we're going to review the third movie today. The first two are up on my channel if you want to check those reviews out. But today we're going to take a look at, of course, same from my six Blu-ray pack box set here for Paranormal Activity, the first six movies. We're going to take a look at Paranormal Activity 3 from 2011. Again, first time watch for me, just like 2 was, and just like the rest of these will be. So, Paranormal Activity 3, let's go ahead and get into it. So, Paranormal Activity 3 is a 2011 American found footage supernatural horror film directed by Henry Jost and Ariel Schulman. It is the third installment of the Paranormal Activity series and serves as a prequel, mostly set 18 years prior to the events of the first two films. It was released in theaters on October 21st, 2011. Paranormal Activity 3 was also Jost and Schulman's first horror film. So, in March 2005, Katie delivers a box of old videotapes to her pregnant sister, Christy Ray, and her husband, Daniel, which holds footage of young Katie and Christy with their mother, Julie, and her boyfriend, Dennis. A year later, Christy and Daniel's house is ransacked, and the tapes are missing. The VHS footage, filmed in 1988, makes up the rest of the film. A young Katie and Christy are living with their mother, Julie, and her boyfriend, Dennis. Dennis notices that since Christy's imaginary friend, Toby, appeared, strange things have been happening around the house. Dennis and Julie attempt to film a sex tape, but an earthquake interrupts them. After reviewing the footage and noticing an invisible figure revealed by falling dust, Dennis is advised by his friend Randy to place cameras throughout the house. Dennis and Julie hire a babysitter named Lisa to watch the kids, but she becomes desperate to leave due to several terrifying incidents. The following night, Christy tells Toby they're not friends anymore. So, yeah, that's to set up the premise, the beginning of Paranormal Activity 3 from 2011. As far as the cast goes, here we got Chris Smith as Dennis, Lauren Bittner as Julie, uh, Chloe Senjury as Katie, a young Katie, Katie Featherston as adult Katie, Jessica Tyler Brown as young Christy, Sprague Graydon as adult Christy, Dustin Ingram as Randy Rosen, and Haley Foote as Grandma Lois. So, yeah, that's to set up the premise and the cast for the 2011 film Paranormal Activity 3. I like this movie. It doesn't quite reach the standard or the level for me of the first two movies, and I'll get into why as I get into my review here. But it's still an enjoyable watch. There's still lots to like here. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting with the pros for Paranormal Activity 3. I do like, and I think it was inevitable after the first two movies. I do like that the movie takes us back to when Katie and Christy are young girls, so that we can see the trauma that they're talking about in the first two movies, where they're adults. Exactly what they experienced based on what we're told. I think that expands on the story, the backstory, obviously. It expands on these characters as well because we're already connected to them. But I think with this movie, this third one, we have even more connection, and we care about these characters even more now. When I go back and watch the first two, because now I've seen them as young girls and what they're experiencing. So I think that was a good connection. I think the movie does a good job with giving us this story of when they were kids. So that's the first thing I like. This movie has some really unique and interesting, different ideas regarding the filming and camera work. Specifically, the one thing that really stands out and is different in this movie and sets it apart is they have an oscillating camera basically throughout basically like the second third of the starting with like the second third of the movie, maybe middle of the movie. Um, this boyfriend slash stepfather is he's like a wedding photographer, wedding he films weddings basically. That's why he's got all the cameras. That's what they went with for this one, which I'll get into that in a little bit. But so he's got cameras that he decides to set up because since weird things have been happening since this imaginary friend of Christie showed up. But one of the things he does is he like mounts a camera onto an oscillating fan or something. So you see as an audience member, we see the camera going back and forth between a kitchen and a living room. And that's very effective for this kind of a movie. It really is, because you know you're going to see stuff with that. And the movie does a good job of using that camera quite a bit and focusing on things, people leaving, people coming, people not there, other spooky kind of things. And so that's where I really give this movie the biggest thumbs up, is they came up with a very clever and unique idea that's different from the other movies regarding the filming of this one from a found footage standpoint. Just brilliant for this franchise, and definitely makes this entry stand out. I really like that and what they did with it. Very effective. Um, there are some really creepy and disturbing ideas and images, especially at the end of this movie, of course, where you got characters walking through rooms or turning off the lights and Bloody Mary and games of those natures, and just kind of doing different things. Where you know something's going to happen, but you don't exactly know what. This film does a pretty good job with that. Towards the end of the movie, we have a character walking through like a dark house, different rooms, falling upon symbols, and then ultimately the big climax. I thought that was effectively done. Kind of a slow walk, but really building up tension. That's one thing I can say that these first three paranormal activities all do very well, is that buildup of tension. This one does that as well with that kind of camera work and those kind of effective disturbing images and what they do with characters in this movie at certain points. Very effective way to creep out an audience. I have to imagine when this came out in the theater, there was a lot of fun that was had in the theater audience. Well, I don't think the acting is overly great in this movie, comparatively speaking to the first two. I thought the acting by the two young girls was quite good, especially when you consider the type of movie that it is. It'd be very easy for child actresses or actors to play it up for the cameras, knowing what kind of movie they were in and having cameras all over the place. Um, but I never felt like they did that. I never got the impression that they were doing that, and they genuinely seemed scared when they needed to be scared, and believable in their actions with what they were doing. Like when one of the girls, I think it's Christie's, talking to the imaginary friend, I believed her. I mean, it didn't feel like it was put on or anything. So yeah, I definitely credit the young girls, the young actresses, Chloe Senjury and Jessica Tyler Brown. I thought they were both directed well, and I thought they were both good, which isn't always the case with child performers, as we know. And then finally, the whole use of having one of the girls talk to an imaginary friend, I think, is very effective for this franchise and in this movie, especially when they made the brilliant idea of having a stepfather boyfriend character as opposed to a husband or the actual girl's father, because he's kind of an outsider and he's not used to. He thinks it's weird that kids have imaginary friends. He's not used to hearing footsteps of one of the girls getting up at night and walking around, and that totally plays into the whole point of these movies. So I thought that was just a really brilliant idea, having that stepfather there instead of a regular dad, because now he's questioning what's going on more, where the mom just sort of blows it off and is a lot more understanding with having kids and stuff. It just makes for a good and believable dynamic between those two characters and really the whole family, frankly, that plays into this ultimate third act of this movie. So yeah, those are my pros for Paranormal Activity 3. I will mention too, the special effects are good once again, like they were in the first two movies. I even feel like they might have some more in this movie, but again, I don't think I saw any CGI. They all seem reasonable and not over the top. So stuff was good from a technical standpoint. Now let's get into the things that I didn't like about this movie and what hold it back a little bit. A little bit different tier than the first two movies for me. And one of them, and this isn't the big one, but we're once again back to the found footage problem that I have with these type of movies, where the second one was very clever in having the house get burglarized and then installing security cameras that was what told the story, or what we were looking through. In this movie, we have to go with a guy that happens to be a wedding a video recorder for weddings. I want to say photographer, but he's not really a photographer when he's taking video. So like a video recorder for weddings. And that's fair enough, I suppose. That can happen. But just the fact that he's operating these handheld cameras every chance he gets throughout this movie, and again, even when we get to the end, and it's clear that there's danger and peril around him, rather than seeing it through the eyes of an installed security camera, where we once again have somebody walking around with a camera on their shoulder. And it's the problem that I have with found footage. I know I've talked about it before, but it bugs me. It just kind of takes me out of the movie a little bit more than it otherwise would have. So we're just expected to go with it, of course, just like most found footage movies. But my big problem is the ending of this movie. And I think I've heard other people talk about it in a few reviews that I've watched. Um, the ending is creepy. I'll give them that with some of the things I talked about with the imagery and the filming and stuff like that. But as far as a narrative standpoint goes, I can only assume that this ending is a setup for the next movie. Now, I haven't seen the fourth movie. I don't want anybody to comment down below and say yes or no to that because I don't want you to spoil it for me. I'll be watching it in a few days. But it ends very ambiguous, and I'm not quite sure what's going on here. I mean, I kind of think I understand what's going on. Um, I just wasn't crazy about it. It just didn't quite stick the landing for me the way the first two movies' endings did. I wasn't crazy about a certain direction that was taken regarding one of the characters in this movie. I just felt like it was all too cheap and unnecessary, and it's kind of what you get once you start getting into more sequels in a franchise. But the ending, yeah, it's just kind of confusing and ambiguous. And as a self contained movie, I don't think it works as well as the first two. Like the first two movies have sequels, and this movie, of course, ties into those as we go back even further. But as self contained movies, you can still watch them and not have to wait for the next movie. Where with this movie, I'm assuming that you do. That's my only assumption without having seen the fourth movie. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just didn't like it. It just didn't stick the landing for me. Like I said, it's creepy. The idea is creepy and the imagery is creepy. So I'll give them that part. But as far as being able to watch it from beginning to end, it just doesn't work for me like the first two movies did. Um, I also think part of that's the fact that I wasn't as connected to these characters, specifically the adult characters. There's like what is there, three or four adults in this movie that either come in or out at some point. The two main, like the mother and the boyfriend or whatever, the stepfather. I wasn't quite buying what they were selling as much, either from an acting standpoint or just being as connected to those adult characters as I was to the ones, certainly in part two, but even the first movie with Mika and Katie. Um, the one exception are the girls, as I talked about. I thought their acting was good. I didn't think they put them in. Well, they were put in peril. Um, it didn't bug me as quite as much as the second movie did with the infant, as I talked about, because they're probably like 7, 8, and 10 or something like that. I'm guessing as far as ages go. Um, but I was connected to them, not just because they're kids, because there's plenty of kids I don't connect to in horror movies, but I think it's because they do a good job and they're well directed here, and believable. So, but yeah, as far as the other characters and the acting, the adults, I felt it more here in terms of the acting not being quite as good and not being quite as connected to these characters in part because of that. Um, and the adult characters here make some really stupid decisions. And you might say, well, they normally do in horror movies. But the problem is, this is following a movie where they didn't really do that in the second movie. They didn't have to make those stupid decisions to make the movie work, which is why I'm a big fan of the second movie. This one, they kind of did, and they did in the first one a little bit too. Although I felt it more here, um, and because I wasn't as connected to them, um, that stood out to me like a little bit more of a sore thumb in this movie, frankly. So wasn't crazy about that. And then my final con, which is a little bit of a nitpicky one, but this movie feels more jump scary, especially in the first half of the movie, where of course we're introduced to our family, we're introduced to our characters, and we have the setup. They had to throw some cheap jump scares in there. The first two movies really didn't do that, but this movie, I think maybe because they've heard from some people that's not as crazy about this franchise. Oh, the movie's so boring. Besides the last 15 minutes or so, and they probably took that to heart and thought, well, let's add a couple of cheap jump scares, where basically it's the characters just trying to scare each other. I thought this franchise was above that. I was wrong. I don't know that there's. I'm guessing there's probably going to be more of that kind of stuff in future movies, but I don't know because I haven't seen them yet. But that really stood out here, and I wasn't a fan of them because again, they're not really jump scares. They're just jump startles, if you will. And I just not crazy about jump scares. They're cheap, they're lazy, and I think it's a bit of fan service to some people out there that have a loud voice online. So, with all that being said, though, guys, I still enjoyed Paranormal Activity 3, even though not quite as much as the first two. I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. I think it definitely still an enjoyable watch. Like I said, the young girls did well. I like the oscillating camera. I like that they went back and showed the Katie and Christy when they were kids because we've been hearing about that for two movies now and what happened to them. So a lot works in here. There's just some things that don't. But 8 out of 10 still for Paranormal Activity 3 from 2011. Go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of Paranormal Activity 3 from 2011. Do you like it more than I do? Less? Why not? Please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series or any of the rest of my horror content for the rest of this year, 1 month, and into next year. So, with that being said, I hope everybody's doing well. Hope you're enjoying this Paranormal Activity franchise review series. And as always, stay scared. Bye.